At 5:17 in the morning, in international waters of the Caribbean Sea, the Venezuelan patrol vessel Guaycamacuto made a decision that would change everything. With no warning, it began a sudden hostile engagement. Its Otto Melara 76mm naval system thundered through the darkness, cutting through the quiet mist before sunrise. But the crew had no idea what was coming next. Just 18 seconds later, the ship would receive a brutal lesson in modern naval power from the United States Navy. That single reckless move did more than trigger a tense encounter at sea. It also pushed the situation toward a dramatic 48-hour ultimatum from President Trump. This moment did not come out of nowhere. It was the final stage of a plan that had been building for weeks. Venezuela believed it had the advantage. Its commanders trusted the confusing maze of rocky Caribbean islands, unpredictable sea conditions, and low-cost disposable drones to give them enough cover to pressure American patrols without paying a price. They thought they could hide, distract, and overwhelm. They were wrong. What they underestimated was the Aegis combat system and the unmatched surveillance power of the P-8 Poseidon. To most people, this part of the Caribbean looks like paradise: blue water, white sand, and postcard-perfect islands. But beneath that beauty lies one of the most important smuggling corridors in the Western Hemisphere. A huge share of illegal substances moving toward the United States travels through these waters every year, making this region a critical pressure point. Venezuela understood that. They used the islands, the rough currents, and the difficult radar environment as a natural shield. It was clever, but it was not clever enough. Right in this strategic choke point, Venezuela made its gamble. On paper, the mission looked almost impossible. The Venezuelans had the home field advantage, sharp island chains, hidden routes, and the ability to launch drone swarms with little warning. At the same time, strong Caribbean currents and complex terrain could interfere with radar performance. So how does the U.S. Navy deal with swarms, interference, and an opponent trying to disappear into the environment? How do you respond when the threat is designed to stay unclear? The first move in this high-stakes chess match did not come from a destroyer. It came from a converted Boeing 737, circling calmly at 30,000 feet, far beyond the horizon. This was the P-8A Poseidon, the U.S. Navy's premier maritime surveillance aircraft. In a mission involving hidden smuggling networks and aggressive naval patrols, you do not send in brute force first. You send in precision. You send the aircraft built to understand the ocean from above. The P-8 exists for one main purpose: to master the art of looking down. Its most important tool is not a strike system. It is the AN/APY-10 multi-mission radar mounted beneath the nose. This is not just a simple radar sweep. It works more like a high-resolution scan of the ocean's surface. For this mission, its greatest advantage was synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. Instead of merely detecting a vague shape on a screen, the system gathers thousands of radar snapshots as the aircraft moves. Then onboard processing combines those images into a detailed picture of what is happening below. That is how operators inside the aircraft can tell the difference between a Venezuelan patrol vessel, a civilian freighter, and smaller surface contacts from roughly 150 miles away. This is integrated warfare at its finest. As the P-8 scans the area, its operators mark potential threats and build a clear picture of the battlefield. Position, course, speed, and radar imagery are compressed and sent through Link 16, a secure military data network designed for fast, protected communication. The information moves from the P-8 to satellite relay and then down into the Combat Information Center of the USS Gravely. And when it arrives, it is not just a radio message that someone has to write down. It appears directly inside the Aegis combat system as a track on the main display, complete with the data collected from above. The Venezuelan ship did not realize it had already been detected, identified, and placed on the board before its own crew had even settled into the morning routine. But the P-8 has one major limitation. It is still based on a Boeing 737. It is large, noticeable, and not designed to disappear from sensors. That is why it operates from a safe standoff distance, outside the reach of Venezuela's coastal defense systems. It is a calculated trade-off. The aircraft's surveillance power is extraordinary, but its size makes distance essential. So it circles high above the Caribbean, unseen and patient, while the Venezuelan vessel moves forward with confidence, not realizing the trap had been prepared hours earlier. Then the order came from the Venezuelan captain, cutting through the silence before dawn. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Their entire plan depended on forcing the encounter into extremely close range, where confusion, speed, and pressure could work in their favor. Their chosen system, the Otto Milera 76mm, was not built for long-distance precision. It was designed to dominate a close encounter, fast and aggressively. Its purpose was simple: overwhelm an opposing ship at close range like a massive high-speed storm of metal, tearing across exposed equipment, radar antennas, and open deck positions with a rapid stream of 76mm rounds. Their doctrine was built around one idea: get close enough to see every detail on the other ship's hull, deliver a sudden opening strike, and then disappear back into the maze of islands before the larger force could fully react. For a smaller navy trying to challenge a far more powerful opponent, the concept made sense. It was fast, risky, and aggressive. But the entire plan depended on one dangerous assumption: that their movement had not been detected. They believed they were the hunters preparing the ambush. In reality, they had already stepped into one. The American response was quiet, digital, and almost cold in its precision. Inside the USS Gravely's Combat Information Center, there was no panic, no confusion, only procedure. The first defensive layer was not a direct counterattack, it was deception. The destroyer's advanced AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite, known as Sidekick, came online. This system is built to confuse, mislead, and reshape what an opponent thinks they are seeing. First, the Gravely entered MCON, sharply reducing its own electronic emissions. On sensors, the massive 9,000-ton destroyer no longer looked like a major warship. It appeared far smaller, closer to the profile of an ordinary fishing vessel. Then Sidekick began the real performance. It created powerful false radar signatures across the area, filling the electronic picture with ghost targets. To the Venezuelan crew, it looked as if multiple vessels were moving through the darkness. But they were only illusions, digital shadows meant to draw attention away from the real ship. While the Venezuelans were reacting to targets that did not exist, the Gravely's defensive systems were already handling the incoming threat. That is where the RIM-162 Evolved Sea Sparrow, or ESSM, comes in. The ESSM is not designed as a first strike system. It is a protective shield in motion, built to intercept fast-moving threats before they can reach the ship. Here is how it works. The Aegis combat system tracks the incoming round and calculates the exact point in three-dimensional space where an interception must happen. The ESSM does not simply chase the object, it races toward that predicted meeting point. In the final moments, its onboard seeker activates and begins making tiny course corrections at extreme speed. The maneuver is so intense that no human pilot could survive the forces involved. But for the system, it is just mathematics, timing, and execution. One by one, the incoming rounds were stopped in midair with automated precision. The Venezuelans thought they had pulled the Americans into a close-range confrontation. Instead, the Gravely proved that the real battle was happening on a completely different level. But as the crew continued to break apart the first phase of the attack, the situation changed. Venezuela revealed its hidden advantage. This was not just a reckless close-range move. It was a coordinated plan with a more sophisticated layer behind it. From a concealed coastal position, a Russian-made Buk M2E system came online, likely with foreign specialists assisting its operation. But it did not launch immediately. Instead, it created a powerful, localized GPS interference zone. In an instant, the clean, precise digital environment the US Navy depends on became unstable. Navigation data became less reliable. Guidance systems had to adapt. Then a new contact appeared on radar, and then another, and another. It was not a single threat. It was a swarm. Dozens of low-cost commercial drones were moving in fast from the nearby islands. Each one was small, cheap, and expendable, but together they created a serious problem. This was classic swarm pressure, but with a clever twist. The drones were not the main danger, they were the distraction. Their purpose was to force the Gravely to spend attention, time, and defensive resources on a wave of inexpensive targets. The ship's close-in systems and interceptors would be drawn toward the swarm, while the more serious threat waited in the background. The drones were the cape in front of the bull, and behind that distraction, the Buk system was preparing its next move. On the Gravely's main display, a countdown appeared, 90 seconds. That was how long the crew had before the drone swarm reached them, while GPS guidance across the area remained unstable. Venezuela had built what looked like a brilliant trap: GPS disruption paired with a fast-moving drone swarm. It was a textbook anti-access and area denial problem, the kind of scenario designed to make even the most advanced modern warship question what it can trust. But there was one flaw in the plan. They believed the battle would stay inside the horizon. The American answer came from a place Venezuela could neither see nor reach. The USS Gravely made a smooth maneuver that, on Venezuelan radar, looked like a withdrawal. To the Guaycamacuto, it seemed as if the American ship was backing away under pressure. That was exactly what the Gravely wanted them to think. As the Venezuelan patrol vessel and its drone swarm pushed forward with growing confidence, they moved farther away from the protection of their coastal GPS disruption zone. Step by step, they were leaving behind the shield they had counted on. It was a classic rope-a-dope. Let the opponent believe they are gaining control. Let them move too far. Then change the entire game. The next order was not for a close-range countermeasure. It was for the SM-2, the Standard Missile 2. This is one of the Aegis system's long-range tools, built for engagements far beyond the visible horizon. If the ESSM is a close-range defensive blade, the SM-2 is the long reach of the fleet, designed to control the battle before the opponent fully understands where the danger is coming from. And here is the key detail. GPS disruption did not stop it. The SM-2 does not depend on GPS to find its way. It can launch using inertial guidance, an internal navigation system based on gyroscopes and accelerometers. In simple terms, it knows where it is moving without needing signals from outside. For most of its route, it follows that internal guidance while receiving occasional updates from the Gravely's powerful SPY-1 radar. Only near the final phase does its own seeker activate to refine the approach. That made it exactly the kind of system built for an environment like this, where electronic interference was meant to confuse everything. Inside the Combat Information Center, the message was calm and controlled. The false withdrawal was complete. The Gravely turned back into position. The targets were selected. In that moment, the confrontation stopped being a close-range contest near the islands. It became a deep-water engagement controlled by data, timing, and distance. This was not chaos. It was choreography. The Aegis combat system connected every moving piece into one coordinated picture. The SM-2 interceptors launched from beyond the horizon and appeared on the Gravely's main display as bright tracks moving across the map. Their paths were not planned only for speed. They were planned for timing. This is the principle of a time-on-target engagement. Different systems can be launched at different moments, from different positions, yet still arrive at the decisive point almost together. It is the naval version of a checkmate delivered from several directions at once. As the SM-2s entered their final approach, a countdown appeared on the screen. This was the moment where physics, information, and years of training narrowed into one outcome. The first SM-2 was not aimed at the Guaycamacuto's hull. That would have been too crude and unnecessary. Its objective was much more specific, a small section of the superstructure containing the vessel's main fire control radar. The interceptor's proximity system activated at the precise moment, releasing its fragmentation effect just above the target area. The goal was not to send the ship to the bottom. The goal was to take away its ability to continue the engagement. In seconds, the delicate radar arrays and communication antennas were disabled. The Venezuelan vessel lost its eyes, its coordination, and much of its connection to command. This is the logic of effects-based targeting. The purpose is not destruction for its own sake. The purpose is to remove the opponent's ability to operate while keeping the situation from spiraling further. But the P-8 Poseidon was still watching from above. Its high-resolution sensors scanned the vessel and delivered the next assessment. One secondary system remained active. The order came for a second engagement. This time, the objective was the engine room. The message was clear. The warning phase was over. It was the final mark at the end of the message. The second SM-2 arrived with overwhelming force. Its speed alone was enough to punch through the lighter structure of the vessel before its internal payload activated inside the engineering section. In moments, the Guaycamacuto's power and mobility were gone. The ship was no longer a fighting platform. It was a drifting metal shell. But even after the main threat had been neutralized, the Venezuelan plan had one last piece still moving. The remaining drones from the original swarm, now without proper control, continued forward on their last programmed route. They were no longer being guided with strategy or precision. They were simply following momentum, pushing ahead in a final blind approach. That is exactly the kind of moment the Phalanx close-in weapon system was built for. The CIWS is the ship's last protective layer, an automated guardian designed to react when there is almost no time left. Its nickname, R2D2 with a Gatling gun, exists for a reason. Its built-in search and tracking radar locked onto the approaching drones, identified them as immediate threats, and generated firing solutions without waiting for manual direction. Then the 20mm Vulcan cannon came alive with its unmistakable roar, sending a dense stream of tungsten rounds into the air and creating a moving barrier between the ship and the incoming swarm. One by one, the drones disappeared from the screen. The engagement was over. The loss of the Guaycamacuto was a tactical victory, but the larger result was being measured far from the Caribbean, inside briefing rooms and intelligence reports in Washington. The first impact was logistical. By removing a key patrol vessel from the equation, the US Navy did more than win a single encounter at sea. It disrupted one of the main routes used by hostile networks to move high-value, illegal cargo through the region. For a time, that flow was sharply reduced. The second impact was psychological. The speed and accuracy of the American response sent a clear message through the Venezuelan command structure. Their carefully prepared coastal trap, their island advantage, their drone swarm, and their electronic disruption had all been broken apart with calm precision. The confidence behind the operation collapsed almost overnight. So what was the real lesson from those dark Caribbean waters? Venezuela made the classic mistake of confusing bold tactics with true strategic power. They believed speed, surprise, and local terrain could overcome a fully integrated naval system. They thought they had created the perfect trap, but the reality was much harsher. They had entered a game where the other side could see the board, control the timing, and change the rules before the first move was even finished. Never sit down at a poker table against an opponent who not only knows every card, but also owns the entire casino. But what do you think would have happened if Venezuela had refused to step back? Was such a strong response the right decision, or could another strategy have worked better? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the strategy, technology, and pressure points of modern naval power. Anchors away.